Have you ever met someone who doesn't say much, yet somehow speaks volumes just by being there? They don't need to raise their voice or demand attention. Their presence alone shifts the atmosphere. What if you could hold that same quiet power just by learning to stop reacting? Some people don't need to dominate a room to own it. They walk in, and something shifts. You feel it instantly. Not because they say something profound or make a dramatic entrance, but because they don't. It's subtle. It's the way they hold themselves, the way they don't rush to speak, the way they seem perfectly comfortable in silence. Their stillness carries a kind of authority that no words ever could. And you know what's fascinating? That calm energy often rattles others. There's something about not being easily readable or accessible that makes people uneasy. It sparks curiosity. It causes others to chase, overthink, and even obsess. Why? Because in a world full of noise and oversharing, true restraint feels like mystery, and mystery is magnetic. But here's a question. What if you started doing the same? What if you stopped responding to every opinion, every invitation, every emotional wave that tries to pull you in? Imagine this. You choose silence over the urge to explain. You pause instead of rushing to reply. You put up boundaries, not to push people away, but to protect your peace. That's when things start to shift radically, because the world around you is used to your predictability. Society trains us to react, to please, to maintain harmony even when it costs us ourselves. But the moment you step outside of that role, when you stop handing yourself over so easily, people get confused. And in that confusion, something powerful is revealed. They didn't truly see you. They only knew how to handle your reactions. Think about that for a moment. Why does your absence cause discomfort? Why does your silence make them restless? Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." So the next time someone gets angry because you're no longer so available, ask yourself, are they truly upset with you? Or are they wrestling with their own lack of control? Because it's not your silence that's the problem, it's what your silence reveals. It becomes a mirror that forces others to face what they've been avoiding. But more importantly, it reflects back to you just how often you've been driven by emotional obligation. How many times have you said yes when your whole body screamed no? How often have you forced a laugh, sent a reply you didn't want to send, sat through a conversation that drained you, all in the name of keeping peace, of holding onto a connection that wasn't even built on truth? Why do we do it? Because we're taught that love means being constantly available, that if we want to matter, we must be endlessly reachable, endlessly ready. But at what cost? Have you ever reached the end of the day feeling hollow? Not tired in your body, but tired in your soul, as if someone siphoned your energy without you even noticing. That kind of fatigue no nap, no snack, no conversation can fix. That's what happens when you give your energy away too freely to people who never earned it in the first place. You said yes not from joy but from fear. Fear of disappointing. Fear of being unloved. The Stoics saw this coming centuries ago. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself in his meditations, ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? And yet, most of us go through life acting as though our time and energy are infinite. Spoiler, they're not, and in the next part, we'll explore exactly why guarding that energy isn't selfish, it's survival, and it's freedom. And once you realize how much of your energy has been drained by those who never truly valued it, the question becomes impossible to ignore. Why do we keep doing it? Why do we keep stretching ourselves thin, handing over pieces of our soul just to feel noticed, just to feel like we matter? The answer lies not in weakness, but in something deeply human. It's what Carl Jung called the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted. We smile when we want to scream. We say I'm fine when we're silently falling apart. We become actors in our own lives, reciting lines that please the audience while the real version of us slowly fades into the background. And the more convincing the performance, the more we lose touch with who we really are underneath it all. But if we've all been wearing masks for so long, how do we even begin to take them off? Where do we start if we want to reclaim our energy, our peace, and our sense of self? Jung offered us a clue: psychic energy. It's the invisible force behind every thought, every choice, every emotional reaction. And like physical energy, it's limited. Every argument you engage in just to prove a point, every apology you offer, when you're not even at fault, every yes you say out of guilt costs you. And unlike money, there are no refunds. You can't recharge psychic energy at will. Once it's spent, it's gone. So the real question becomes, are you choosing where your energy goes? Or are you letting the world pull it out of you without consent? Each time you react without reflection, you leak power. The Stoics warned us of this. They believed true strength doesn't come from controlling others but from mastering the self. Epictetus said it plainly: no man is free who is not master of himself. And yet here we are, ruled by reactions we don't even question. We jump in to explain, to fix, to smooth things over, without even asking, is this even mine to carry? But imagine for a second, what if you didn't? What if instead of automatically reacting, you paused, took a breath, observed, reflected? What if you gave yourself the space to choose a response instead of offering one on demand? It would change everything. But here's the catch: silence feels foreign. Stillness can feel threatening. And people often reject what they don't understand. Have you ever noticed how irritated someone gets when you don't text back right away? Or how they accuse you of being distant when you simply set a boundary? It's not about your absence, it's about their loss of control. Your availability made them feel secure. Your constant agreement validated their worth. And when that disappears, they're forced to face something they've been running from all along: emptiness. But what about you? Are you ready to face that silence too? To sit in the discomfort of not being needed, not being liked, not being constantly included? Because that, right there, that's the price of true freedom. The Stoics taught that peace is never found by managing the outside world, but by gaining control over our inner one. As Seneca once wrote, "He who is brave is free," and bravery, in this context, means stepping away from familiar roles, patterns, and performances even when doing so makes others uneasy. So where do we begin? It starts by paying close attention. What triggers your anger? What makes your heart race? What urges you to over-explain, to prove, to please? These moments aren't random. They're signals, and if you listen closely, they'll show you exactly where to start. And once you begin to notice what triggers you, what makes you overreact, overextend, or over-explain, you begin to see where your boundaries are weakest. And that awareness, that's where the real work begins. But the goal isn't to become cold, distant, or emotionless. It's to become sovereign. So what does it truly mean to be sovereign? It means you belong to yourself. Your time is yours. Your thoughts are yours. Your energy yours. You no longer give others the power to dictate your emotional weather. And once you claim that, something powerful happens. You stop reacting. And when you stop reacting, people lose the ability to manipulate you. Carl Jung once described projection as the unconscious act of transferring our emotions onto someone else. But the opposite is also true. When we make ourselves too emotionally available to open, to there, we become blank canvases. Others begin projecting their fears, their needs, their wounds onto us. And often, We confuse those projections with love. We mistake them for connection, for closeness, for friendship. Think about it. Have you ever had someone who only reaches out in a crisis? Who disappears the second their needs are met? Who calls you strong only when it benefits them? They're not really connecting with you. They're connecting with the version of you that fits their narrative, a role you've unknowingly agreed to play. And why did you play it? Maybe because deep down you were afraid. Afraid of being seen as selfish. Afraid of being left behind. Afraid of disappointing someone who once made you feel needed. But the most effective manipulation doesn't come through yelling. It doesn't even come through words. It arrives quietly, through guilt, through that heavy, unspoken pressure that tells you owe them something, even when you don't. But what happens when you stop playing the role? When you choose not to explain, not to fix, not to show up just because someone expects you to? People get uncomfortable. They start asking, what happened to you? Some will call you arrogant, distant, selfish. Not because you've changed for the worse, but because you've stopped serving their story. You've stepped out of the character they assigned you. And in doing so, you forced them to face their own reflection. So how do you stay grounded in that moment, when guilt creeps in and the pressure to explain yourself grows loud? By remembering this truth, silence is not absence, it's amplified presence. In a world that constantly rewards noise, the one who can sit in stillness commands attention. But silence isn't just about holding your tongue. It's about discernment, about choosing your battles wisely. Not every accusation deserves a defense. Not every conversation needs your input. Not every invitation is worth your time. Why do we fear silence so deeply? Why do we believe that saying nothing makes us weak? Because we've been conditioned to believe that being present means performing. But here's the truth. Real power often comes from refusing to perform, from walking away without needing to slam the door, from choosing to protect your peace rather than explain it. This was at the very heart of Stoic thought. True freedom, the ancients said, is not about what you can control. It's about not needing to control anything at all. Not being shaken by praise or insult. Not needing to prove your worth. Just being firmly in your truth. But let's not sugarcoat it. Silence has a cost. You'll lose people. Some will misread you. Some will say you've changed. And they're right, you have. But pause and ask yourself, were those relationships really built on truth? Or were they sustained by your constant availability? Your endless willingness to say yes. The more you grow, the more selective you become. You start to realize words are expensive and your energy is even more so. And that realization leads to something deeper. How to protect your energy before it's spent. Let's talk about that next. And once you realize how valuable your energy is, how costly it is to give it away freely, you start to understand something even deeper. Not everyone deserves the full story. So what do you gain when you stop explaining yourself to people who never really listened? What grows in the space that used to be filled with over-apologizing, over-justifying, overreacting? Clarity, peace, strength. When the noise settles, you start hearing something that's been drowned out for far too long. Your own voice. You remember what you like, not what pleases others. You begin to feel what you truly need, not what you've been taught to chase. You reconnect with what you value, not what others demand. And in that sacred silence, something beautiful begins to unfold. You stop chasing connection. You become it. Isn't that what we're all really searching for? Not just external peace, approval, acceptance, belonging, but internal peace. A stillness within that doesn't depend on anyone else's presence or permission. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming your truest self. And that path, it doesn't lead through the crowd. It begins with a departure, a stepping away from the collective noise. It often requires solitude, not the kind that isolates you in sadness, but the kind that heals you, the sacred kind that slowly stitches you back together. But how do you know you're really on that path? Watch who walks away. Notice who gets angry when you start protecting your peace. Pay attention to who accuses you of changing the moment you start saying no. Those reactions aren't red flags. They're proof that you've stopped betraying yourself just to be accepted. Still, doesn't that hurt? Of course it does. Growth and grief often arrive hand in hand. You'll grieve the version of yourself who once said yes to avoid disappointment. You'll grieve the illusion of being wanted even if it wasn't real love. You'll mourn the comfort of belonging, even when that belonging came at the cost of your authenticity. But after the grief, after the silence, that's where rebirth begins, little by little. You begin to build a life rooted in truth, not in obligation. You attract people who respect your boundaries, not those who benefit from you having none. You create space for what nourishes you, not what depletes you. And you start to feel strong, not performatively, not loudly but quietly, steadily, unshakably strong. And isn't that the real goal? To create a life where you're no longer available for anything that doesn't align with who you are, where you stop accepting emotional crumbs just to feel needed and start demanding peace, respect, and authenticity. That kind of life doesn't come from reacting. It comes from reclaiming, from remembering that your presence is a privilege, not a promise. So now comes the final, most honest question of all. Are you ready to be misunderstood? Are you willing to be alone for a while? Can you walk away from what's familiar in order to finally return to yourself? Because that is the cost of choosing peace, but it's also the path to freedom. And if this message resonates with something inside you, then you've already started. You've taken the first step. The next ones, you take them in silence, in your absence, in your refusal to explain what no longer needs explaining. You don't owe them anything, but you owe yourself everything. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to say it out loud. I choose my peace. But even after making that choice, how do you protect it? How do you stop yourself from slipping back into the same old patterns, the same emotional traps, the same exhaustion? That's what we'll explore next, because real change isn't just a decision, it's a discipline. Reclaiming your peace is powerful, but protecting it, that's the real work. Because peace isn't a what-on choice. It's a daily discipline. It's a quiet, sacred promise you make to yourself, especially when the world tries to pull you back into old roles. When someone presses your buttons, when they say you've changed, when they accuse you of being cold or distant, when they try to drag you back into the familiar rhythm of people-pleasing, explaining, apologizing, that's the moment you pause. You take a deep breath, and once again, you choose peace. The Stoics were clear. Your greatest possession isn't anything external, it's your inner fortress. That part of you no one else can touch unless you invite them in. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." You can't control how people respond to your silence. You can't control their discomfort, their disappointment, their projections. But you can control how you hold your silence. You can turn it into a space, a sanctuary, a home where your truth lives louder than anyone else's expectations. You might be wondering, isn't it lonely to choose yourself so relentlessly? At times, yes. You will walk alone. You may feel misunderstood, but solitude and loneliness are not the same thing. One is isolation, the other is intention. Solitude is sacred. Some of the greatest thinkers, mystics, creators, and seekers have all arrived at the same truth. There is a silence within you that holds more wisdom than 1,000 voices outside ever could. And in that silence, you discover something radical. You don't have to earn love by being everything to everyone. Your worth is not tied to how fast you reply, how much you give, or how much you can tolerate. You begin to see clearly. Those who truly value you will honor your boundaries. They won't try to tear them down. They won't vanish when you become less available. They'll rise to meet you. But can you give them that chance? Can you be strong enough to stop rescuing everyone else and brave enough to stop abandoning yourself? Because this is where emotional strength is born, not in resistance, not in arguments, but in non-reaction, in stillness, in clarity, in the unshakable knowledge of who you are and your refusal to keep proving it. You begin to look back and realize how many choices were made from fear. Fear of being forgotten, fear of being unloved, fear of being unwanted. But the moment you stop overgiving, the moment you embrace stillness, instead of constant availability, something begins to shift. That fear starts to fade. Not all at once, not overnight, but little by little. It loses its grip every time you choose to protect your energy instead of leak it. And in that space, something new is born. A quiet confidence, a calm strength, not pride, not ego, but a deep-rooted clarity that says, I don't need to be defined by others anymore. That is the foundation of Stoic self-respect. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. So what happens when your thoughts are rooted in truth, in peace, in self-respect, not in survival? Your soul begins to shine. So ask yourself, what would your life feel like if you stopped apologizing for your absence? What if your silence wasn't empty, but powerful? What if it became a declaration? A calm but clear message to the world. I am no longer performing. But of course, living this way in today's world comes with resistance. So how do you remain firm? How do you keep your peace when others try to pull you back in? Let's talk about that next. I am no longer giving my energy to what drains me. I am no longer available for anything that costs me my peace. That kind of clarity radiates. It doesn't make you arrogant. It makes you free, and that freedom speaks louder than words ever could. When you stop being available to everyone, you start becoming available to yourself. You open the door to better relationships, stronger boundaries, more meaningful conversations, and a life aligned with who you truly are, not who you've been trained to be. And what about those who still don't understand you? Who try to guilt you, label you, twist your silence into something negative? Let them. Their confusion is not your burden. Their projections are not your truth. You no longer owe them explanations. You owe yourself alignment. This is not about living with walls around your heart. It's about knowing when to open the door and when to keep it closed. It's about preserving your energy like it's sacred, because it is. The more you practice this, the more you'll notice how the right people gravitate toward your peace, and the wrong ones disappear into the noise they can no longer infect you with. You've spent years watering dead plants, apologizing for your needs, shrinking yourself to be digestible, but not anymore. The journey begins now, with every small moment of silence, with every conscious pause, with every breath taken instead of a reaction given. You're returning home to yourself. And what you'll find when you get there is something extraordinary. You don't need to be liked to be whole. You don't need to be available to be worthy. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. You just need to be honest with yourself first and foremost. So, here's the final question. Are you ready to protect your energy like your life depends on it? Because in many ways it does. Your time, your peace, your presence. These are not favors. They are gifts. And from now on, only those who can honor them should receive them. You've already started. You've already taken the first brave steps by choosing silence, by stepping away, by recognizing what no longer deserves your reaction. What matters now is that you don't turn back. Even if the world calls you selfish, even if people fall away, even if it hurts. Because what waits on the other side of that discomfort is something precious. Your full self, untamed, unapologetic, unshaken. So stay silent if you must. Withdraw if you need to rebuild in private. Emerge in peace. Let the world wonder. Let them misunderstand. You're not here to be understood. You're here to be whole. If this message spoke to something deep inside you, don't just scroll past it. Sit with it. Let it change something. Let it remind you of your strength. And if you're ready to keep walking this path of inner freedom and unshakable clarity, make sure to watch one of the suggested videos on the screen next.